Change. The Astrotherapy Podcast. Interviews. All right. Here we are. I'm so grateful to be here today with you, John Minnie. And today we're exploring the theme of change through the lens of traditional and evolutionary Chinese medicine. We're talking about change, not just on a personal level, but also deep cultural change in how we heal, connect with our bodies, and remember what we've forgotten. So for all of those of you listening today, John Minnie is a very dear friend of mine, and we've known each other for 8 years now. He is a Chinese medical practitioner of over 35 years, lifetime martial artist on the internal and external planes. I would say an incredible human being all around, deeply explorative, provocative, and a catalyst for change. So thank you so much, John, for being here with me today.
Thanks for having me.
So as we begin, I want to ask you first, as we're exploring change, there's so much that can come up. It's such a big theme. And as we immerse ourselves into exploring the word change, what first comes to your mind?
What comes to mind is the process that we are all in right now, some willingly and some unwillingly. In some ways, change only really comes unwillingly. That's what comes to mind right now, because of the nature of our minds. A lot of us like to think that we're very open to change. And we believe, honestly, sincerely, we believe that that we are willing to roll with change, but we might be willing to roll with changes, but are we really willing to change? And so that's the first thing that comes to mind, that the real change, there's always a kind of a natural resistance that comes to us whenever we're forced or faced with actual change, with real change. The image that I see is that we're all caught up in this process of global change right now, because many of us, I don't know if most, but the people who I come in contact with all around the world have a sense that they are witnessing something happening, but they don't have a real sense of agency in what's happening. And that's sort of the definition of trauma. To be caught in a situation that you don't really like, but there's nothing you can do about it. That really is the definition of trauma. And so there's a kind of global population trauma that is occurring right now, with the people not feeling that they have a sense of agency with what's happening.
You work with one of the oldest healing systems on Earth. Can you share a little bit with us about how your journey into medicine began and when it started to evolve for you into something different than what is known as traditional Chinese medicine?
I always knew that I wanted to practice Chinese medicine from the time I was a baby. I can remember very clearly when I was a baby holding on to the bars of my crib, wondering how I was going to learn acupuncture. When I was a little kid, I experimented with it a lot on my own. I would steal my mother's sewing needles, and I knew that there was a way to I had this notion that there was a way that you could put the needles in the body and it wouldn't hurt. Right? And so I experimented with that extensively. Actually, after school, I would do that. I would take those sewing needles and work on myself in that way. Anyway, I experimented a lot from the time I was young, and I don't even know how I knew what it was, but I did know that it was a thing, and I knew it was something that I was going to do. I also had a very deep experience when I was young with my first experience with Chinese medicine, with Chinese herbology. And that experience was, I went on a field trip with my school, elementary school, down to Chinatown. And when we went to Chinatown, this is Chinatown in San Francisco. And at that time in Chinatown in San Francisco, there were a number of herbal apothecaries. And we went into the herbal apothecary, and as soon as I smelled it and I saw the herbs, I remembered the whole thing very deeply. It was a very deep experience for me. And at that time, on school field trips, they didn't really mind where the children were in the way that they do now. And so the whole class left without me, and they went down to the fortune cookie factory or something. I don't know where they went. And I was still there in the herbal apothecary, and there was this old Chinese pharmacist who was there, and I was standing there remembering and just crying and crying with the memory of it. And he understood what was going on, and he sort of held space for me at that time. And anyway, it jogged my memory very profoundly. And then as time went on, I got more and more interested in learning about Chinese medicine. So eventually, after college, I wound up going to Taiwan because there still were no schools in the United States. And I attempted to study in Taiwan, which was a very wonderful experience to be there at that time. This was in the early 1980s. But there was really, even in Taiwan, there was really no way to study Chinese medicine there as an outsider. The only way that you could really learn Chinese medicine at that time was to be the firstborn son of a Chinese medicine family. And that's how it got passed down. And eventually I wound up coming back to the United States when they started the first schools here. And so I studied here in San Francisco, and I was very, very fortunate to study with one of the great herbal masters of all time, Dr. Yaqi Lai. And I learned from him initially, and went through school. And then after I got out of school, I also studied with one of the great acupuncturists of all time, Dr. Dafu Tan. And the very nature of Chinese medicine is one of consolidation and synthesis. The origin of Chinese medicine really came originally from shamanic traditions that existed all over China.
So Chinese medicine is a vehicle for the processing and evolution, let's say, since these very ancient times, for us to heal as a humanity, as individuals. What makes this moment so different in your eyes as far as change and what we're experiencing? Like, for example, you were saying your patients are all experiencing this change moment, lots of change. It's out of their agency, or they're searching for agency in the midst of this change. Why is now different, and how can Chinese medicine, traditional and or innovative practices, help us in this moment?
I think that the answer to your question can be answered, or it can be understood, if not answered, through dating apps. And what I mean when I say that is that in the past, when people would date, they would date within more or less their geographical location. There was this subset, whether it was at college or whether it was in your hometown, wherever it was. There's this group of people that you were connected with. Okay. And so then through that subset of humanity, we would scan that group of people, and somebody either worked or didn't for us. Okay. But now, because of our information technology, people can go out on these dating apps, and they can, instead of having this small subset, they have a much different subset that encompasses people all around the world. I don't want to say it's a much larger group, because it may or may not be. Because people who are involved with dating apps and things like that, they really believe that that's the only way that they can meet people and meet potential partners. They actually believe that. It's not true at all. And what they don't understand is that just by participating in that particular system, it creates its own subset of people who are similar in some ways to them, but dissimilar in other ways, but they don't realize that how manipulated it is. There are people who are engineering our experience without us necessarily understanding that that's what they're doing. And they're engineering that experience to optimize how they capitalize on our experience. And so that's driving people into a sense of frustration and passivity. And that's really what's so different now, is that previously we had much more of a sense of agency because we were in a smaller pond, basically. But now we're in the big pond and they're big, big fish. And there are all kinds of things that we don't know and things that we don't understand. So we feel more limited in what we can do, to the point where many people feel that they can't do anything at all, and they're just sort of passively. It's like they're watching a movie when they're going through life rather than playing an active role.
To go back to your perspective, your vantage point, your experience as a medical practitioner, coming from an ancient tradition such as traditional Chinese medicine, how can we apply some of that ancient wisdom in this moment? And also, what is it that's emerging for you in the face of this moment of change?
Thank you. So through this time, I have been looking for ways that I can help to empower people to get their sense of agency back. When we use the term evolution, that we use that term a lot. And another term that we see a lot in certain circles is the term personal evolution. And I think that's a really funny paradox, because there's no such thing as personal evolution. Evolution happens as a species. Okay. Evolution doesn't happen without death of the individual. And so personal evolution is a very kind of interesting idea. And I suppose we can kind of turn it inside out and say, okay, well, what is it in us that needs to die in order for us to personally evolve? I could say that, yes, that is something that is real. But evolution does not happen without death. And so we have to ask ourselves that question always when we're healing and when we're advancing. What is it in us that needs to die? But I've been searching for what can we use in Chinese medicine, and how can we get out of this game that we are participating in, partially of our own volition and partially not of our volition. And one of the things that I was stuck with is that the model that we have for Chinese medicine is the same that it is for any medicine in a lot of ways. And that is, we try to find the best healer that we can find. Then we go to that healer, and then that healer does whatever it is that they do. And that has an effect, hopefully a healing effect on us. Then we jump back into our lives, and most people, what they're doing when they go to a healer is they want to become how they were before they got sick. But that's not what sickness and illness is about. Remember what we're talking about, the personal evolution. Something needs to die in our healing all the time. So that's an aspect of our old self that needs to die. And so when we go to the healer, they either help us with that or they don't. They either help us to feel better, whatever that is, or they drive us more deeply through what that process of transition is that we're going through. But in any case, we go to this healer, and then what do we do? That's the big question. What do we do with the healing that we receive? Are we willing to make the changes that we need to make in our lives? Because all illness comes from how we have been living our lives in one way or another. So it's either what we're eating, the people we're relating with, the hours that we keep, the ways that we're working, the job that we have that we're either satisfied or not satisfied with. And also, underneath it all, and this very much relates to our conversation, our sense of belonging. And that sense of belonging has everything to do with our sense of being in the right place at the right time. Mm. And so, in our own process of healing, what is it that we are doing that is bringing us into the driver's seat of our lives and bring us back into the driver's seat of our own health and healing? How is it that we need to live in as much as we can at this point? And this is a challenge because many of us live in a culture that is dying, perhaps in a world that is dying. There's going to be something else that's going to be reborn. Here I am with the world of Chinese medicine, but we're stuck in this old paradigm because people come to me as a healer and I do my best to help them. So maybe I'll give them Qigong exercises to do at home. And when they're at home, they take the herbal prescription that I give them like that. Okay. So that part is good. The doing the Qigong part is good. But it isn't always enough to just do maybe one exercise or something like that. Okay, so I was looking for how can I put people back more in the driver's seat of what they need to do for their own healing. Meanwhile, I've got this tremendously complex system of Chinese medicine that can help them, but only if you know how to use it. And that's where my expertise comes in. Obviously, I can't teach people how to give themselves acupuncture, but I wanted to be able to apply or teach people how to apply some of the principles of Chinese medicine to their lives in a way that wouldn't overwhelm them with the complexity, but learn how to treat themselves in general to create an environment, an internal environment that would be prohibitive of any illness happening. So the real breakthrough happened for me in that realm when I began investigating the original Paleolithic form of acupuncture, which was done with stone needles. We just place the stone needles on the surface of the skin, and we use that needle to investigate what's underneath the skin by developing a certain kind of a sensitivity to what's happening at the tip of the needle and what's the interaction that's happening between the needle and the person's body. And it's been a really wonderful exploration and kind of revelation for me to teach this to people and to watch what happens when they take that tool and begin rolling with it. I'm not saying that we can heal everything on our own. Sometimes we do need to go for help, but there's a tremendous amount that we can do on our own. And that's what I'm teaching people to do.
Thank you. As I'm sitting here listening to you, I'm having a very visceral experience of what I've been able to explore with you as a student, as someone who's in the witnessing seat of this emergence coming through you. And I've been a yogi for decades, and I always was very curious about Qigong, but I never found the right moment for that exploration until now. And something about what you're bringing through with the Minji Foundation's work, which I hope that you'll speak a little bit more about that, which incorporates Qigong and the stone needle practices, really called to me in this particular time. And I do feel like there's a deep resonance with this foundational work, with the grounding work, with the foundational kind of capacity to move through this moment in time via Qigong and working with the energetics within the body, on earth, the heavens above, our bodies being a bridge in between the two, and as well the stone needles, which, as you're mentioning, it's this extension of us. It's an extension, as you've taught, of the chi and how we can work with that for self-healing. So I really appreciate what it is that you've been bringing. I'm very excited as a student to continue learning. And I just want to know, if there's something that you could share with us around the synergy between the Qigong and the stone needle practice.
So the ability to be able to take our Qigong practice and suddenly have a microscope That's what the stone needle allows us to do. In addition, the stone needle is a kind of a companion that we develop a relationship with. And from the outside, it sounds kind of kooky to say that, but this is the experience that people are having. These stone needles are incredibly unique in the world. They are literally the same needles that were used by the Paleolithic shamans in China. And what I do is I give people a structure to work within. That structure is based in, it's actually based in all of Taoist cosmology, but it relates to certain aspects of Chinese medicine. Again, we're not working on healing anything specifically, but we're working with the big picture. And the big picture, as it's conceived in Chinese medicine, is that here we are, we're in the world. The world is always changing. The degree to which we resist those changes is the degree to which we develop illness. And so, again, we're talking about the idea of evolutionary medicine, Chinese or otherwise. It's always so interesting to me that as we have this notion in the West, we have this notion of history that we're coming from this sort of primeval, primitive, I even hesitate to use that word, right? But this sort of dark beginnings, and they were heading more progressively toward this great enlightenment, which these days has taken the form, we believe that technology is what's going to do that for us. So we have this notion that history is progressing forward and that we're getting better and better over time. But it's so interesting because in indigenous cultures, many indigenous cultures, and in what we've historically called the East, they have a totally opposite view of our notion of history, and that is they believe that historically we already had that state a long time ago, that the world was an amazing and beautiful place, and that we've been in a process of progressive decline and collapse ever since then.
Yeah, John, as you're saying this, I'm really getting present to the paradox and kind of the labyrinth that we're facing right now. Um, you know, we're in a moment of, let's say we're in the present moment. And on one hand, we could say there's all these advancements in technology. What we're experiencing, perhaps, or some of us are experiencing, is a devolution, right? We're actually regressing and we're losing some of what we feel like we've even had in this lifetime. That was very important to us. And so we're in a state of loss, yet we're being told, or we're feeding into, or we're being forced into, in some regards, this other notion or idea that we're in this stage of advancement. And there's this path, right, that maybe I'm experiencing conflict with personally, in my relationship with technology and how it can help me in certain ways and how I feel like it's very much hindering me in others. And if we juxtapose that with medicine, in the advancements of medicine, but what we're also seeing is that some of those advancements might be actually making us ill, or our relationship with those advancements might be creating dis-ease. And we could get into a lot of conversations around our relationship with big pharma and kind of the intentions behind that as a business endeavor rather than an invitation for wellness. But at the same time, as we're looking at the past and the future, the backwards and the forward of all this, the antidote that is emerging through you, or what you're presenting in your work now, is something about, in order to step forward and reclaim our personal healing, we need to maybe perhaps step back into remembering, or a reconnection, a connection to that which is much deeper, that belongs to something more ancient. And maybe in that we can connect with something that is very progressive, that could actually take us into a future that we'd all want to be a part of.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree. And that is kind of brings us full circle in our conversation about, well, what is this? What is it? What is it that each of us can do? Gosh, I don't know. What is it that I can do? That's what I hear people saying. What is it that I can do? Well, the thing that you can do is what you came here to do. And we get overwhelmed by this bombardment of what's happening in the world. Blah, 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 blah. It just goes on and on and on and on. But the key is that the answer is always 100% personal. Each of us came here with some kind of a gift. And if we can't bring that forward for whatever reason, whatever excuse we make for not bringing that forward, we will not feel that our life is successful. But whatever that is, if we do bring it forward, we will feel that we've been successful, at least in doing our part. Some cultures are doing better than others, but this is a part of the challenge that we experience, is that the cultures are interpenetrating with each other. The cultures are being diluted, and many times they're being lost because of the strong influence of popular culture. Now, culture can be a bridge to what our personal gift is that we're bringing here. But we may be facing a time when all culture is wiped out. Um, and that's the direction that things are going. But eventually, we're going to come back to a place, whether we are able to retain aspects of culture or not, I don't know, I can't say. But eventually, that human spirit inside of us, if it's in a vacuum, right? If it's in a vacuum, or if it has any way that it can connect with the outside, that's the what's deepest inside of us, is what we came here to do. We're going to find some way, somehow, somewhere, in some timing for that to come out.
I think that's really important what you're saying because, people are afraid right now. People are feeling there's depression. People are feeling lost. Um, I know I see it a lot in the people that I work with. There's a lot of confusion. Um, and personally, I'm feeling incredibly inspired by even the conversation that we're having, John. There's a lot of pressure to conform. There's a momentum that is quite strong, moving in a direction that is unknown. And as you were saying previously, and we mentioned, a lot of people, a lot of us are feeling a loss of agency in that momentum. And at the same time, you know, working with the physics of momentum, working with the energetics of force, there's something quite extraordinary that can happen as a seed inside of that, as a living being inside of that, exactly because of what you're saying, that our human spirit, that which lives inside of us, is so extraordinary and has superhuman, supernatural capacity to reveal itself. And most of us are not fully aware, if any of us, of the magnitude of what's possible when that is pressed, when there's pressure, when there's force from the outside. And it reminds me very much of how diamonds are formed, and that's a metaphor that's used so widely that I hesitate to go there because it sounds so cliche. And yet there's something very alchemical about the external pressure that we might be feeling. And I just get curious myself of how to work with that, inside, as far as being a creative, as far as being an artist, as far as being a human, as far as being a parent, as far as being, someone who is aching to touch into what you're talking about, which is we all come here with a gift, and many of us haven't yet touched into that. So perhaps what's happening now is really a very big invitation in some ways.
Yes, it is. As you're expressing what you're expressing, a song comes to mind Janis Joplin song where she says, freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. In a sense, the times are working for us because the more desperate things become, we're faced more and more with a very plain choice between facing that conformity and what it's like to live in that conformity and the horrible emptiness versus what we know is right inside of us to do. And so in some ways, the worse things get on the outside, the more clear that choice becomes, even though it may be more difficult to make, seemingly more difficult to make that choice, seemingly more life-threatening to make that choice. One of the things that's extraordinary now that's happening is that because of the current understandings in neurological science, our own social mind, the social mind that's built into us biologically, has been almost completely co-opted and engineered by the people who are behind our current technology. It's a very sophisticated science in how to turn our own social mind against us. Whereas previously we would learn and we would seek others to connect with in order to move something forward, let's say. But that whole notion has been shattered. It's been shattered and it's been co-opted. And so it makes it very difficult to move forward in those former ways. And so again, even in that way, in some ways we can't look outside at all, even to others who we formerly may have trusted in many ways, because society is they've turned us all against ourselves. There's no more we the people. It doesn't exist anymore. At least
John,
we're
can you give an
taught to believe
example
that.
of that? Like, because it sounds like a broad stroke, and I'm just wondering, in the past you said that we would connect with other people. You mean if we were like looking to create a project together, or had an issue that we wanted to talk about, like we would go towards a human in those cases? That would just be the natural
Yeah.
response. But now that's being thwarted because we're being taught that we can go to our chat GPT or our virtual therapist, or we can create in a silo. We don't need a team anymore. We don't even need to come together in person. Is that what you're referring to?
All of the above, and also this whole idea of the siloing that's happening, that people are doing exactly that. What they're doing is they're identifying so much with this belief system, whatever it is, that they go down the silo, maybe with a group of people. And with what you're bringing up, it's interesting. Maybe those people really exist, and maybe they don't, or maybe it's just bots that are telling people what they want to think. This is the great problem. But then what happens? This is what we're seeing over the last few years, so strongly, so intensively. People will form a group, and then another idea will come along, and it'll turn out that there's maybe the people in the group have different feelings about whatever that idea is. So that group breaks up. And so the groups keep breaking up because people are so strongly identified with whatever their beliefs are. There's this constant shattering whatever the groups have been. So that's a part of what's happening. But then also what you're talking about is the actual tech influence that's beginning to happen, where people are, whereas in the past, maybe we would look for a wise person. Now people are looking to AI to tell them whatever the answer is that they're looking for. Even now I'm starting to see people who are coming in to see me, and they're asking AI about their medical questions, and they're following the advice. It may not be a bad thing, but it may be, because it's easy to forget that in the effort to be pleasing to the user, AI will say anything, whether it's
And that's
true or
exactly
not.
and that's how it's programmed, is
That's how it's
to
programmed, is to
please
please
us.
us. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
something that I have to discuss with people a lot is that when they come to see me, they have to face some uncomfortable things that aren't necessarily pleasing in the moment. And I have to say, you didn't come to a spa when you came to see me. That's not what this is about. This is about healing. And healing isn't always about pampering yourself and isn't always about this sort of spa-like notion of healing. That's a part of it. It can be a part of it. Don't get me wrong. But there are times when it's very much not like that. There are times when it's very much the opposite of that.
Sometimes when I'm talking with my clients, I use the example that when we're healing a third-degree burn, it doesn't necessarily feel good, but it's important. So
Yes.
not all healing is this kind of rosy, romantic idea, but it can be painful to heal.
Yeah, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And
So
that
what
brings
it
us
sounds like what you're discussing is reality.
Yeah, it brings us full circle back to the idea of this notion of change. When you brought up the notion of change, and the first thought that I had was, well, if we're really facing change, then there's this resistance that comes up, and that's a resistance to healing. So flowing with change is the same thing as flowing with our healing. They're very much, all these things are very much related. And there's the personal healing that we're all attempting to do at this time. At least I think anybody that's looking at this podcast, we're trying to find what our personal healing is, but we're also trying to find that personal healing in the context of a culture that's perhaps dying, perhaps on a planet that is dying. What can we do?
So John, if someone out there listening right now is feeling out of sync in their physical body, mental, emotional, spiritual, in some way with what's happening in our modern world, what would you recommend? Is there a first step somebody can take to try and, kind of come back into some kind of synchronicity of self?
In the first place, I would say that response itself is very positive. And that's very important to keep in mind. It's not okay. What's going on right now is not okay. And it doesn't matter what drugs we take to try to make ourselves feel okay. It doesn't matter what kind of therapies, anything. Fundamentally, what's going on is not okay. Unless we can take whatever it is that's happening now and look at, okay, is there a possibility that it's going to be okay after what's going on right now? That's the attitude we want to take. Like that's the end goal. That's the entelechy of what we're trying to find all the time. So that sense of agitation, that sense of feeling like something's wrong, listen to it. Listen to it. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you, although that's what they're going to pitch to you. They're going to say, oh, you have a chemical imbalance. What is it? What's not okay about the current situation? Just take this pill or look at this Calm app or whatever it is that they want to calm people down. I don't think that's necessarily the answer at all. Being grounded and rooted in ourselves, sure, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we have a calm affect about what's happening. Creativity is a wonderful thing, and it can come out in all kinds of different ways. So the thing I think that's important is to find, first of all, what is authentic for us, and to learn what is the most positive and creative way that we can manifest. I even hesitate using that word. What's the most positive way that we can act or not act in this moment that will help us to get closer to that goal and feel better within ourselves about the role that we're playing. Because no matter what the situation is, we're always faced with, are we going to go passive in this moment? Or are we going to be more active?
Yeah, I would call that objectivity as well, perhaps, where we can have some spaciousness between that which is happening, and not being immediately reactive, but being able to observe it, witness, and then respond from a conscious place without identifying ourselves as the thing or, being lost inside of it. You mentioned authenticity, and in in response to the question about, someone might feel out of sync. And I love your response, because who isn't feeling out of sync right now? I'd love to fully understand their experience and know if that's actually true, if that's actually possible, because we are human beings, we're very porous, we're sensitive, and the world is in a particular state that is not in sync. So yeah, finding that authentic experience and being able to work from that place definitely feels empowering. And it might not be, oh, I feel, like okay with what's happening here. What do I need to do in order to feel okay right now? Do I need a pill? Do I need this person? Do I need an app? Whatever it is that we're going to feel okay, but maybe not feeling okay is a very authentic, very real response to what we're exploring here as humans in this time. So I really appreciate your answer there. So, John, going back to what you're bringing forth right now, which is, as a traditional Chinese medical doctor, you have been inspired to reach back into Paleolithic times, like even previous times, to find an antidote to this moment where we're, at a crossroads of how do we want to live into this future. Um, can you share a little bit about how working with those ancient practices, um, how we can apply that to what we're talking about? And also, I'm just curious of if you're meeting any resistance from your peers or other people that work in traditional Chinese medicine that see what you're doing as something that might be rocking their boat, because anything that is, brings change often is met with resistance. So I'm just wondering about your experience in that regard.
Historically, I've brought a number of issues to the field of Chinese medicine that have met with a tremendous amount of resistance on the part of the community. The people who are practicing Chinese medicine want it to thrive as a business. And so that has led to some conflicts uh, between what might be ethically the best things to do for our patients and for our communities and for society, and those people who are practicing Chinese medicine to have a thriving business. And so traditionally, I've been a person to bring a lot of issues like that to the table. So so here's my stance with that, with what I'm doing now, is that actually by teaching people how to work with themselves and become familiar with their own chi and working with their own chi, it gives them much more ability to work in a much more effective way with someone who is a good acupuncturist. And there's this notion in the world that, okay, there are all these different kinds of medicine. And okay, Western medicine is good or bad, or Chinese medicine is good or bad. And we want to put these generalizations that don't apply. Even with what we were talking about earlier about, the advances, I actually don't believe that there are any advances in medicine that are detrimental to humans at this point. I believe that the way the medicine is being practiced and the way medicine has been taken over by corporate interests, that's the negative part. It's not the medicine itself. And even how the doctors themselves are being forced to practice by the institutions that they work for. Which is very, very strong. And it boils down to the same thing that I was just talking about the Chinese medicine practitioners, that, Chinese medicine is trying to fit into the Western medical model, and that model is gone. It's dying. It's completely gone. The patients themselves are fed up with it. And so this idea of empowering the patients to learn more about the chi themselves. In some ways, sure, there's resistance to it because in a certain way, many of the Chinese medicine practitioners who are out there, they have a certain kind of a commodity because chi is such a mysterious thing and it's such a exotic thing for people, and they think that they need to go to the acupuncturist in order to have that kind of an experience. And so I'm definitely breaking down that wall. I'm saying, no, actually most of Chinese medicine is meant to be practiced at home. Another thing, though, is that the way that I'm approaching it from this Paleolithic standpoint, um, it's very different than how Chinese medicine is viewed today as well, because the methodology that I'm teaching people actually goes all the way back to the roots of Chinese medicine. And even most people who are practicing Chinese medicine now are very far away from what those roots were. So I'm hoping that this practice of using the Qigong and the stone needles is going to up the ante for the Chinese medicine community as well. And I'm hoping that we'll all become better and more serious practitioners, because the truth is there are many practitioners who are out there who are practicing Chinese medicine, but they aren't necessarily living it.
I'm curious, John, for you, there's obviously you're very much in the midst of this innovation, the emergence of stone needle therapy and this foundational work. What is next for you? What's on the docket of change for you?
To me, what I'm most excited about is watching what is happening with the stone needle practice as people practice it. Because one of the biggest joys that I have in teaching it is seeing the things that spontaneously arise that I never could have anticipated. So it's wonderful to watch that, and I'm excited to continue to follow what that development is and share that with more and more people. That's the most exciting thing for me right now.
Thank you, John. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us? Any last thoughts?
Just that no matter how hopeless and disempowering life may seem or the world may seem, that each of us does have a very specific role to play in what's happening now. And don't let anybody or anything take that away from you. And you can find it. It is there. And no matter how deeply we need to deprogram you to find it, we'll do it.
Thank you, John. And thank you, everyone, for joining us on this podcast today around change.
Thank you, Ciela.